I am so honored to introduce you to Joe Reagan, a U.S. Army veteran, and he's made two tours to Afghanistan, the 10th Mountain Division, multiple awards and decorations, and a Purple Heart. Elton and I love the Purple Hearts. We've done a lot of work with them in Goldsboro, and we've waited for the Purple Van, and we've had a lot of excitement with Purple Hearts. So welcome, 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 and please tell us all about the organization that you represent.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And again, Colonel Fore, thank you for sharing your story. It takes a tremendous amount of courage for any service member to talk about their service, and sometimes that's connected to trauma, as 9/11 is a day of trauma that we all shared, and sometimes it's out of humility. And I think listening to Colonel Fore's story, I hear elements of both, where not only was it a traumatic event, but also I think we definitely saw inklings of that humility, where I think that Colonel Fore has done far more than she led on, and was far more of a leader than she led on during that day. And I know, and I'm confident that the people that she served alongside saw that and appreciate her leadership and her continued leadership to support our country. So glad to be sharing the virtual stage with you this evening. My own personal 9/11 story. I was in college at Norwich University. For those that aren't familiar, Norwich is a small private military school. So it's kind of like West Point or the Air Force Academy, but we pay a whole lot of money to go and take on that torture. Um, Now, I did not. When I entered Norwich, it was because I was kind of a troublemaker in high school, and figured that the discipline and the structure would be helpful to help me get through college. But when I started, it was the fall of 2000, and we were in the middle of what we were calling the peace dividend, and people were questioning why someone would join the military. In fact, I had no intention of joining the military after college. I wanted to be a high school teacher. That was what the path that I thought I was going to take. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, and so many of my peers, many of whom have already committed to serving our country, so many others signed up after the fact, and I chose to go that path. Um, you know, there were many ways I could have chosen to serve. I had the opportunity to pursue any branch of the military, or even within the Army, and I decided to choose the infantry because I felt that was where I was going. If I was going to serve, then I should be on the front lines. And likewise served with the 10th Mountain Division as a volunteer, knowing that the 10th Mountain Division at the time was one of the most deployed units in the United States military. So as I left college, I knew that within a short amount of time, it would be likely that I would find myself in Iraq and Afghanistan. And in the fall of 2006, I took over a platoon of the 10th Mountain Division while serving in Afghanistan. That ended up being a 16-month deployment. And over the course of that deployment, um, the casualty rate in the platoon exceeded 100%. Every member of the platoon was awarded a Purple Heart at least once. We had several with 2 and even 3 awards of the Purple Heart during that deployment. And so needless to say, it was a very difficult and challenging deployment for all of us. And that kind of what leads me to where I am today with Wreaths Across America. I'll pause for a second because I want to also do justice to the story of our organization. So Wreaths Across America started in 1992, and this was a businessman in Maine by the name of Morrill Worcester. He ran a wreath making factory in upstate Maine. And at the end of the holiday season, he found himself with about 5,000 surplus wreaths, and he was trying to figure out what to do with them. And suddenly he decided, well, you know what we should do? Let's go down to Arlington National Cemetery and let's honor the men and women that are laid to rest there. And so after some help from from our senator, Senator Olympia Snowe, he was able to go down and do that. Because at first Arlington was like, you want to do what? And it was kind of confusing, but eventually they were allowed to go down. And that first year, it was a small group, mostly just the family members, a couple of neighbors, some trusted employees. And Morrill was really taken back by the fact that they were kind of put into the Civil War section of the cemetery. So as he's looking around, they're going from headstone to headstone, realizing that there are no longer probably any living relatives of these people that are interred there. And how sad that is, that each and every one of these men and women have a story that could be shared, and that story is likely being lost to history. And so they kept going back year after year. And again, it was a small family gathering, usually only about 5,000 wreaths each year, and they would move from different parts of the cemetery. And it was about 2005. It snowed in Washington, D.C., which was unusual. And all of these wreaths were then laid on the fresh snow in Arlington National Cemetery. And it was a public affairs officer for Arlington that went out and captured the image of these beautiful wreaths on the headstones. And people started writing in. They said, we want to do that too. How can we do this in our community? How can we move forward with this and to do it? And so in 2007, we actually established ourselves as an independent 501c3 nonprofit with a mission to remember, honor, and teach. And that's remember the fallen, honor all those who serve, and teach the next generation the value of freedom. And that's always been integral to everything that we do. Personally, since leaving the military, I've been involved I've done private business, I've done nonprofit world, and I found my home at Wreaths Across America a few years ago. And actually was Karen Worcester, who's our executive director. She had one of the first or second times she met me, she said, she goes, one of these days you're going to work for me. And I said, at the time I was working for another smaller nonprofit. I said, Karen, I love what you do. I love being a partner of yours, but I'm really happy with where I am. And about 2020, we started having a conversation of how can we really help to share the individual stories of our service members and veterans to help break down some of the stigma. And especially around 2020, a lot of people were getting locked down. Mental health was starting to take center stage. The veteran suicide epidemic was increasing. And so we said, well, let's just get together and let's just talk. Let's see if we can find people to share their stories. And that will do two things. One, it will help educate folks about the experience of our service members and our veterans and their families. And two, whether you think it or not, there's something therapeutic to sharing that story. By being able to get it out there, by sharing that experience with others is so tremendously therapeutic for folks. And we've seen that. So go back to our mission, remember the fallen. And that's what most people think of us every holiday season. And this year it's going to be on December the 17th at Wreaths Across America Day. People often think, they say, oh, I love what you do at Arlington. And what they don't realize is that Wreaths Across America Day happens in every state of the country. And actually this year we have over 3,100 different participating cemeteries across the country. These are national cemeteries. These are small family plots. There's actually a group that goes and hikes into the mountains of Great Smoky National Park and finds individual headstones of veterans that are interred there and honors them that way. So this really becomes a nationwide mission, but at the same time, it's focused on the community. It's about bringing people together and giving them the opportunity to learn about the experiences of our service members, veterans, and their families. And part of what we've done on that, and this gets into this category of, I had no idea Wreaths Across America did that. So we've, for the past couple of years, have actually had our own radio station that broadcasts nationally on iHeartRadio. This gives us an opportunity to share those experiences. I would encourage all the folks that are listening to reach out to us, because we want to share these stories. Over this past weekend for 9/11, we did a big special where we invited people to share their 9/11 stories and how 9/11 called them to service and called them to serve. And folks like Colonel Fore, who of course was serving at the time of 9/11, was already serving in that capacity. But I'm sure as we kind of found, even after 9/11, finding ways to give back, finding ways to continue to be that leader that's supporting the folks that are under her command. And so Wreaths Across America Radio is one of those opportunities to share the stories of those fallen, to get that out there. We have weekly segments with American Gold Star mothers and American Gold Star spouses, giving them the opportunity to not just talk about how their loved one died, but how they lived and the aspirations that they had, and how that loss inspired them to continue to serve the community. Because everyone that serves, I know there's somebody else here from the Folds of Honor was on earlier. Everyone knows that if you've met a Gold Star family, every one of them, part of their healing journey has been to find those ways to give back as part of the legacy to the loved one that they've lost. And one of the challenges that we face in this country is with less than 7% of Americans having ever worn the uniform of our armed services. A lot of people don't have those direct connections. And I could bore you with a million stories of interactions I've had with people that I was the first person they've ever met that was in the military, and the misperceptions that exist. And so being able to share those stories through things like Wreaths Across America Radio is part of that, of not only helping to preserve the legacy of the fallen, but then also honoring all of those that served. When Karen brought me on as in my current role, one of the things that she said is, how can we honor the dead without taking care of the living as well. And so since our inception through our partnership program, we've actually given over $17 million back to support other nonprofits in the communities. That's actually how I got started with Wreaths Across America. I was one of those partners running a small homelessness program in the state of Maine. We're using the Wreath sponsorships as a mechanism, not only to talk about the experiences of our homeless veterans, but then also being able to provide funding to make sure that we're getting them out of homelessness and getting them on the path to self-sustainability. And so that's a huge part of what we've done. We're one of the largest partners of the 50th commemoration of the Vietnam War. We have a mobile education exhibit that travels around the country and honors all of those that served during the Vietnam era by giving them the welcome home that they deserved. Again, for me personally, having seen the advocacy of those that served during Korea and Vietnam, that when 9/11 happened, they were the first ones to stand up that said, we will not let this next generation of veterans be treated the way that we were. And they've held themselves to that promise. And so to be able to look a Vietnam or Korean War era veteran in the face and thank them for their service and to welcome them home, even if it is 50 years later than it should have been, is a tremendous honor and something that's very, very important to us as part of our mission. And then with our teach component. So this year we've rapidly expanded the teach portion of our mission. One of the things that we've always said is going in and interacting with in the cemetery. There's so much that you can learn just from walking through that cemetery. This past year, I was at Arlington National Cemetery for a Wreath Day ceremony there. And I had my children with me. I have two young boys. See, I always get that, Donna. Every time I talk, I had no idea you did all these things. And I appreciate that because I think that it speaks to the quality of our volunteers that are out there doing this important work and not seeking the recognition that they really deserve, but still going forward and doing it each and every day. And I'm so impressed by what I see our volunteers and our partners doing each and every day. But I'm walking through Arlington National Cemetery with my kids. And one of the children identified one of the symbols on the headstones, one of the markers for religious denomination, or a faith symbol is, I believe, what it's called. And so I start pointing them out. I said, well, this is what this means, and this is what that means. And I start talking about it as I'm walking through the cemetery with the kids. And a few minutes later, I turn around, I've got like 30 people following me now. And they're all just so intent on listening and learning these little nuances that they never knew. And so that's part of it. I know that the mission statement says to teach the next generation of freedom, but that starts with all of us in teaching each other about those experiences and what we're doing and how we've continued to serve. And so that, I think, is really great. And this year, we've actually brought on a Gold Star mother who's a former teacher herself, and she has developed an entire curriculum that is age appropriate for everything going from kindergarten all the way up into the 12th grade, that we're able to share with homeschoolers or school administrators across the country to give them the opportunity to learn more about what it means to serve. And we see that because one of the things that you see going into the national security side, this will be the first time in a very long time that the Army, the Navy, the Air Force are going to miss recruiting goals. Even the Marine Corps is at risk of coming short of their recruiting goal as well. And if you look at the people that are signing up to serve, so many of them have that direct connection. They understand what it means to serve. And so we have these pockets of excellence that are out there in America that would make wonderful soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardians, coasties, anything. But they don't know the experience. They don't know the benefit of that service because they've never been taught. They've never been connected to it. And so that's part of that Teach initiative, is to bring these stories like yours, Colonel Fore, out to young people and to help them understand exactly what it means to serve and to see the value in service. And I use the example of myself. I have a very difficult time sometimes describing why I found the success in life that I did, because when you look at and when people perceive a veteran, ask a stranger to describe a veteran for you, chances are they're going to describe something that looks a whole lot like Captain America or something that looks a whole lot like Captain Dan or Lieutenant Dan. And the truth is that when we look around us, we look at our peers, so many of us on the surface value, you would never know that any of us had served. And so it's up to us to preserve not only our own legacy, but the legacy of all those that we served alongside, especially those that aren't able to share that story. And that's, I think, the real strength of the Wreaths Across America program, and something that I'm always grateful to be able to share that with folks like yourselves that are so committed to service and so committed to sharing those stories with our young people. So again, I can't thank you enough. It really is truly humbling to be able to present for such a wonderful audience. So thank you.
You know, this is so strange because this is why we started our recording, because we met a Purple Heart, Sylvester. I don't know where he is. We've been calling him, but he hasn't called us back. And he told us that when he was in Vietnam, he said, I will not die in Vietnam. And that's what kept him alive. And I said to myself, I listen to all these stories. I meet all these veterans, either at McDonald's or wherever. We need to record these stories and we need to share these stories because people can get inspired when you look at our youth and how they've just, just don't know what life is all about. They need to listen to these stories and feel inspired. And when they're going through rough patches, they need to feel like we'll not die today.
Well,
So
and I think
for
it was
those of
some.
you who are,
I think it was one
yes,
of Colonel Fore's family members that had mentioned it, that they were here. They're celebrating the fact that she lived. And
yes,
I think that is something that when we speak about these experiences, that when you experience trauma, when you experience loss, that gives you a very unique perception. And it's, I guess it's one of those things you look at and you say, well, I'm glad that more people don't have to experience the things that I've experienced. But
yes,
at the same time, to understand that perspective and how that can create so much value, not only in your own life, but in the lives of everyone that's around you. I think that's why it's so important to share these stories. And again, kind of the last person anecdote that I'll share, so many people that I encounter, they'll say, oh, my father served, my uncle served, my mother served, and they never talked about it. And in my own family, my great-grandfather served in the First World War. He was wounded twice. The only war story we have of Ralph Lindsay's experience in the First World War was during the Second World War. His youngest son encountered him. He was not wearing a shirt, and he had this giant scar across his chest from where he'd been wounded by an artillery shell. And he says, "Daddy, what's with the mark on your chest?" He looks at him and he says, "I zigged when I should have zagged." And for 70 years, that was the only story we knew about Ralph Lindsay's service to our country until uncovering the actual journey, his journal that he kept during the war, and realized that there was a whole lot behind that. My grandfather served in the Second World War. We don't know anything about his service at all, still to this day. And as the grandchild, the great grandchild of a veteran, I look at that and say, how much I would love to have those conversations with those people today, the questions that I would ask them. And so I look at that and I said, I don't want my kids to have that same opinion. And more importantly, I don't want their friends and their other peers not to have that as well. Because it is so important to share these stories. It's so important for so many different reasons. Understanding the horrors of war as being the greatest detractor. I think it was Eisenhower that was one that said, it is those that have experienced war that are the ones that are least likely to want to pursue it again. And I think that those are one of the reasons that we need to share these stories, not only because they can be inspirational to us on how we can live our lives better, but also, for our policymakers as a reminder of the fact that, policies have real world implications and that the human cost is something that should never be forgotten.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation. I hope you'll come back. We do Veterans Day, and I look forward to working with your organization. So thank you so much for joining us today. Now, is William and Dawn still here, or do we lost them? But we'll bring them back. We'll bring them back. You're watching Brightside Global Trade. This is a very important day. We're remembering 9/11. We're with Wreaths of America, and we didn't know that they did so much. So we'll make sure that we cover it in our magazine so you can read all about it and you can participate with them and learn more about them. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to doing some more great stuff with you. Thank you.